Mental health professionals, what is something you wish more people knew? I'm a mental health nurse. I really wish people would understand that mental illness is a biological issue with the brain. No one judges a woman who has polycystic ovaries or a person with glaucoma. Why can't people understand the brain is an organ in the body? I hate the stigma our society puts on mental illness. People are afraid to get treatment because they don't want to get a mental illness diagnosis.
I get where you're coming from. It's frustrating how mental health is viewed so differently compared to physical health. The stigma really gets in the way for a lot of folks who might need help. If more people could see mental illness like any other health issue, maybe more would seek treatment without fear. It's a tough situation that needs a shift in perspective.
My girlfriend is an elementary school psychologist. She's the person that will test kids to see if they need extra services, math, writing, reading, ECT, or if they need actual special education. Far too often, the parents pose the largest obstacles in getting the child the help they need. I read these symptoms of this obscure mental disorder online, and I'm now certain my little Bradley has it type parents, and then the parents that don't care at all about their child's situation. Or the people that are just on denial about their kid. Just because your child got a C on a test doesn't mean he is mentally challenged and needs special education. Your kid is average. You need to understand that just because you and your spouse are engineers doesn't automatically give your offspring superintelligence. Calm down. And on the other side of the coin, your kid might need some serious help. Stop trying to justify that because you and your spouse are both engineers, there's no way your child could be mentally challenged.
It's interesting how parents can complicate things for kids. I had a friend whose mom was convinced he was a genius because of her and his dad's jobs. But he just struggled with math like anyone else. It's tough for kids when their parents either overestimate or underestimate their abilities. Sometimes, they just need kids being kids, without all that pressure or denial. Just a simple balance, you know?
Psych nurse here. Please make an effort to learn about these illnesses and understand them. There is a taboo surrounding mental health that truly needs to go. It is so much more prevalent than anyone seems to want to admit. Also, if you feel sad, depressed, or worthless, see someone. You are worth so much more than you will ever see.
That's a solid reminder about mental health. I've had a friend who went through a tough time, and it was eye-opening to see how stigma affects people. They eventually sought help, and it made a difference. It's important to talk about these issues openly, and just like you said, reaching out to someone isn't a sign of weakness. Everyone deserves support when they need it.
Don't forget to have compassion. I work in a mental health crisis center, and it's very easy for staff to get frustrated with clients who are acting out or refusing to engage and write them off as bad people. But I've found that I personally am unable to help someone if I try to engage with them from a mindset of frustration and having little hope that they can or will get better. Living with mental illness is a terrible thing, and the last thing those who are struggling need is another person to judge them, belittle them, or write them off. You never know what it's like to live with their illness, and every person has a different story no matter what their diagnosis might happen to be.
That's a solid perspective. Working in situations like that can wear you down, but keeping compassion in focus really matters. It's easy to forget that everyone has their own battles. Approaching them with understanding instead of frustration can make a difference. Everyone has a story to tell, and sometimes just being present without judgment can help more than anything. It's a tough job, but those small moments of connection can mean a lot.
Clinical psychologist here. Therapy is nothing like what you've seen on television. There are lots of different therapeutic approaches to what you're struggling with. Some are more relational, some are behavioral, some are cognitive, some are reflective, some are a mixture of all of the above. All these approaches can be extremely helpful, and you can choose to try one that you think might be the best fit for you. There is a ton of actual science behind what we do. I feel like this goes without saying, But then again, you don't need to be suicidal or having hallucinations to be appropriate for therapy treatment. So many people wait far too long to pursue treatment because they aren't crazy enough. Go get it. No therapist should turn you away because your symptoms aren't severe enough. If your difficulties are severe enough to make you even consider therapy, then you can benefit from it. You might only need 6 sessions instead of 20, but still, you'd be surprised at how helpful those few sessions might be.
I had a friend who thought therapy was only for serious issues. He struggled with everyday stress and pushed it aside. After some encouragement, he finally went. Turns out, just a few sessions helped him cope better. He realized it wasn't about being crazy, but about gaining tools to handle life. Now he shares his experience, hoping others don't wait as long as he did. Sometimes, reaching out is the best step forward.
I wish people understood more about different disorders. Just because you like things a certain way does not mean you have obsessive-compulsive disorder. Just because you can feel happy and then sad in the same day does not mean you have bipolar disorder. And just because my little sister is screaming and freaking out in public because she is overstimulated and having trouble expressing herself appropriately does not make her a spoiled brat. She has autism spectrum disorder. As someone who is in a master's program for mental health counseling and who works at a mental health hospital, I find most of the public has very limited knowledge and insight into mental health.
It's true that mental health is often misunderstood. Many people jump to conclusions about others' behaviors without having enough information. They don't see the struggles behind the surface. Your sister's situation highlights how important awareness and education are. The more we understand these conditions, the more we can support each other. It's good that you're studying this field to help change perceptions and improve lives.
Nurse here. Mental illness is an illness like any other, i.e. cancer, diabetes. You can go through periods where you are totally symptom-free remission, and there will be times you need to seek help. I always remind my patients that they wouldn't be ashamed of seeking help for a physical illness. So why the shame in addressing a mental health issue?
It makes sense. Mental health should be treated like any other health issue. People often feel embarrassed to seek help when they shouldn't. Just think about it. If someone has a broken leg, they wouldn't hesitate to go to the doctor. It's really about normalizing those conversations and understanding that everyone goes through rough patches. Reaching out for help can be a strength, not a weakness.
So many people mistake being OCD with being anal retentive. Anal retentive is when a person is excessively orderly and fussy. They are usually picky about how things need to be done, perfectionists, and obsessively neat and organized. They hate surprises or changes to routine. Anal retentive issues rarely have a negative impact on the person's ability to complete daily activities. Obsessive-compulsive disorder is a disorder of the brain and behavior. OCD causes severe anxiety in those affected and involves both obsessions and compulsions that take a lot of time and get in the way of important activities the person values. OCD usually interferes with regular daily activities in a detrimental way.
I had a friend who was really organized, always arranging things just so. I thought they were just picky. Then I learned they struggled with OCD. It made sense why small changes stressed them out. They weren't just being difficult, they were dealing with something much deeper. It's interesting how we often misinterpret these behaviors without knowing the whole story. It's a reminder to be more understanding of what others might face.
Depression is very common. You probably know several people who have had it. Here is a list of things not to say to a depressed person. But your life is so good. You have no reason to be depressed. Oh, yeah, I was sad once too, and I got over it. Stop being such a downer. You're bringing everyone else down. You're just lazy. You just need to change one little thing in your life and everything will be fine. There are cases where there is a single cause for depression, like side effects from medication. But these should be discussed with health professionals. Just snap out of it. Have you tried just being happy? You're just making yourself unhappy. You might consider these self-evident. In which case, good. But every depressed person I've ever met has heard at least one of these before, and a lot of times from friends and family.
It's interesting how many people think they understand depression. I remember when a friend was struggling, and I heard others say those exact things. It felt frustrating. They meant well, but it didn't help. It was clear those words just added to the struggle. Sometimes, just being there and listening is better than trying to fix it. Everyone's journey with mental health is different, and it's important to respect that.
I have lots of experience specific to eating disorder treatment work. In my last year with the company, I was asked to work with a more acute unit. It was interesting, and I learned a lot about myself and my own compassion and boundary balance game. There's so much about working in mental health that can't be taught. It really comes down to temperament, experience, and then education. I've worked with many idiots with advanced degrees who end up letting patients run the show because they don't know how to gently and firmly lead. My best advice to anyone working in the field or anyone living with family/friends with mental illness is to take good care of yourself. Do your own psychological work. You need a process space too. And try like hell to maintain a part of yourself that is tender.
It sounds like you had quite an experience in that acute unit. Working in mental health is tough, and it really shows how important self-care is. Balancing compassion with boundaries is key. It's interesting how some people, despite their education, struggle with the practical side of things. It's a reminder that personal growth and self-awareness play a major role in helping others. Keeping a part of yourself tender is crucial in this line of work.
That it's not illegal to be batshit crazy. It is not a crime to walk around talking to yourself. That's why the police can't just go around arresting people for doing that. If someone is psychotic, that's not a crime, and the court cannot issue a warrant to 5,150 a human in the U.S. unless there is a crime committed or that individual is observed committing acts or making statements that endanger themselves or other people, or demonstrate a clear threat to themselves or other people. Furthermore, those with no benefits have to be in a state of true crisis to receive help willingly. So when you see someone acting psychotic, don't treat them like shit. They're probably terrified, lost, and no one can even help them until they commit a crime or become suicidal or homicidal.
I've seen a friend go through something like this. He talked to himself often, just wandering around town. It was strange. People didn't understand him, but I knew he wasn't a bad guy. Just lost, you know? He just wanted some help. But it felt like everyone was waiting for something worse to happen instead. It's tough when the system waits for a real crisis to step in. Quite a reality check, really.
Mental health nurse here. 2 misconceptions I think I would like to clear up. First of all, whenever I mention my job, people have this idea that I work in an extremely violent environment. Truth is most patients genuinely want help, and that the incidence of aggression amongst the mentally ill is more or less the same as the general population. It's when you combine restrictive elements, locked unit, involuntary status, and in most cases impaired cognition and reasoning skills that aggression can turn into violence. Secondly, how easy someone can become psychotic. You don't need to necessarily be a substance abuser or have a deep family history of mental illness to become psychotic. I have seen young people present with first-episode psychosis purely for a lack of sleep and stress associated with high school exams and pressure placed on them by parents. It really emphasizes the importance of psychoeducation and early intervention. I'm sorry if this sounds like a bit of a ramble, just finishing my 4th night shift on an acute ward.
It's interesting to hear this perspective. I had a friend who worked in mental health, and they often talked about misconceptions. People assume it's all chaos, but it's really about understanding and support. They mentioned encountering young adults affected by stress and lack of sleep, something that can hit anyone. It's a reminder that mental health can be fragile, and we should be more aware and supportive of each other. Real talk.
I'm about to start graduate studies in psychology, having completed my bachelor's in the same field. People don't realize how what they do/say can actually cause hindrances in a person's treatment or adjustment back into their day-to-day life. E.g., enablers of addictive behaviors. Also, I can't read your mind.
It's interesting how much impact small things can have on someone's recovery. I remember a friend who struggled with addiction. Some people around him thought they were helping, but their actions often just made things worse. It's like they didn't see the bigger picture. Recovery is tricky, and understanding that everyone's journey is unique matters. Communication is key, but yeah, you also can't just guess what someone needs.
I work at a mental health institution as a therapist. I can tell you there is a huge correlation between variety of leisure, coping mechanisms, and severity of disease, and there is a somewhat causal relationship there. If you find that you have no time for yourself, or you only have one or two things you really do, you are far more susceptible to things like depression, and your symptoms are likely to be more severe because of stress, which tends to compound problems. A wide variety of hobbies and pastimes. And taking time for meditation or a quiet moment for yourself can drastically cut down stress and reduce your chances of having a breakdown and ending up somewhere like my hospital. Doesn't matter if you already have mental health issues or not. Take time for yourself every day to do 2 or 3 different things you like to do, and it will change your life for the better and keep you out of darker territory.
I have a friend who's been through a lot. He used to work nonstop, no hobbies, and eventually hit a rough patch. He started exploring things like painting and hiking. Slowly, he became happier and less stressed. It was surprising how just a few simple activities shifted his outlook on life. Now he always tells people to find time for themselves. It really does make a difference.
If you don't click well with your therapist, you are allowed to seek and/or ask for a new therapist. A good therapist will try to help to work out what the relationship with them was lacking. Also, for friends, family, and SOs of mental health professionals, sometimes this job can get so hard that you need to hibernate for a while. Try not to take it personally if I don't want to talk about work, if I need a night alone, if I ask for something special for myself. Part of surviving in this field is self-care.
It's interesting how important connection is in therapy. I once had a friend who didn't click with their therapist. They felt a bit lost but realized it was okay to look for someone else. It's tough for those in the mental health field too. Another friend worked long hours and just needed space sometimes. They'd disappear for a night to recharge. It's all part of managing the heaviness of the work.
Mental health meds don't work like cough medicine. You can't just take one pill and be better right away. Often antidepressants take time to build up in your system, so if it's only been a week and you aren't feeling better, give it more time. Also, if you stop taking your meds suddenly, you're probably going to feel like shit. Let your doctor know if you want to stop taking them, and they will taper you down. Oh, and just because you tell me you're suicidal doesn't mean I'm sending cops to your house to take you to the state hospital. Being honest is the best way to get you the help you need. It's okay to be scared, but we want to help you.
I get where you're coming from. A friend of mine struggled with this. They thought meds would be a quick fix, but it took a while to find the right balance. There were moments when they felt really low, and it was tough to talk about it. In the end, being open made a big difference. It's all about patience and having the right support around you.
As a neuropsychologist, I want everybody to know that a concussion is not going to give you lifelong cognitive problems. Please ignore ESPN, etc. when they talk about concussions. Also, if you're under the age of 65, it is very likely that the memory problems you're having are normal and not Alzheimer's disease or some other form of dementia.
I had a friend who panicked after a minor concussion. He was convinced it would ruin his memory and maybe lead to dementia. I told him what I knew from research, that most people bounce back just fine. He relaxed a bit but still took it easy for a while. It's interesting how some things can seem way worse than they really are with the right info.
I'm an RN, and I just wanted to remind people that schizophrenics and those having other psychotic episodes can still be normal after an episode is finished, and sometimes they are fully aware of what has transpired. I had one patient who was screaming religious songs for about an hour thinking he was God, and when he recalled every conversation we had attempted to have with him while he was in his episode. These people are still there, underneath their illness, and need to be treated that way. On a personal note, I have pretty severe panic disorder, and it drives me nuts, pardon the pun, when people compare normal, non-pathological periods of increased anxiety to the wholly disabling attacks people with panic attacks experience. It literally feels as if you're dying and you can't be comforted at that time. It's almost like a psychotic and complete physical breakdown that lasts 10 minutes, but can keep happening throughout the day regardless of environmental stressors.
It's interesting how mental health can affect perception. That patient, thinking he was God, probably felt completely justified in that moment, but once it passed, he was back to normal enough to recall everything. It's a reminder that these experiences are just one part of someone's life. And dealing with panic disorder must be tough. The intensity of those attacks can be really isolating, making it hard for others to understand what you're going through.
Most of the positions require a master's degree, but the pay doesn't justify the cost of getting one. I'd love to be a licensed counselor or social worker, but I'd only get a 5 to 8K increase to what I'm making now. I wish my 10 years experience in a variety of different fields, addiction, prison, elderly, hospitals, counted as much as someone with a 6MO internship and a shiny master's degree from Phoenix University.
It's frustrating when experience doesn't get the recognition it deserves. You work hard for years in tough environments, but people just look at the degree. It's like a piece of paper holds more weight than your real-world skills. It's tough to see the gap between what you feel you're worth and what the system values. Just goes to show that sometimes, life isn't fair in the job market.
Currently work in a locked mental health facility. I want people to know that the patients we get through here are not monsters. They're just people who are struggling to deal with something, typically trauma, in a healthy way. Most often, they have significant barriers to leading a safe, healthy life. They are not defined by their history or diagnoses. They're people with many facets, just like you.
I used to volunteer at a similar place. It was eye-opening. You see these individuals struggling, but they're still just people. We shared laughs, stories, and even some deep conversations. It really hit me that everyone has their battles. Their past doesn't define them. It taught me empathy and the importance of understanding. Everyone deserves support, not judgment. Small moments can make a big difference.
Master's level clinical social worker here. If you are a parent interested in therapy for your young child, expect to be actively participating in the treatment. Parents can often see therapy as a place they take their child to get fixed, when in fact the true work usually needs to take place within the context of a child/caregiver relationship. And homework between sessions. Take it seriously. The work you do outside the session is just as important as the work you do in the session.
It's interesting how therapy isn't just about the child, but also the parents. I remember a friend who took their kid to therapy, thinking the therapist would do all the heavy lifting. They soon learned that their involvement was crucial. They had to do exercises at home, and it actually strengthened their bond. It's a team effort, really. The growth happens both in and out of those sessions.
How hard it is for people with mental illnesses to sort of re-enter the world. It's super tough. Funding gets cut when you get a job, but finding a place to live stalls out, and oh shit, you're back at the beginning, for example. And I've seen people from all walks of life. We are all literally only a few steps away from being in the situation I see my clients in, and that many people look down on people for being in. Maybe it's a couple paychecks. Maybe it's family support. but we are all closer to being in a tough situation than we would probably like to think about. No one is exempt.
I know a few people who struggled to find their footing after dealing with mental health issues. It's like they get a glimpse of stability but then hit a wall. They often feel judged by others, but honestly, anyone can find themselves in that situation. It really serves as a reminder that we need to be kinder, because life can change in an instant for any of us.
It is actually very unlikely that someone with a mental health disorder will hurt someone else. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, particularly with someone with paranoid thoughts, etc., but I truly believe that the media makes it seem like everyone with a mental health disorder is violent. Furthermore, if when they are violent, is it much more common that they are a threat to themselves rather than others. I'm not practicing, I just have a BA in psych, but this is still basic undergrad material.
It's true that mental health issues are often misrepresented. A friend of mine once shared how people reacted when they found out he was struggling with anxiety. Instead of offering understanding, many jumped to conclusions about his character. It's frustrating how easily conversations can shift to fear rather than support. He's not violent at all. Just trying to navigate through his own challenges like many others. It doesn't have to be this way.
I am diagnosed with PTSD, 6 times in IRQ and AFG. I don't want it to define me and live a very normal life. I talked to a guy once as part of the VA eval process. He had me lie down on the floor and talk to me for 10 minutes about how to breathe differently. So, I just have a touch of anxiety and aren't very patient. There are a couple of other little things that I wouldn't mind figuring out how to cope with. Alas, I decided I'd never go back. A shame since it's free for as long as I like. Not my bag, baby.
It sounds like you're navigating some tough experiences but trying to keep things in perspective. Everyone has their own way of coping. That guy you talked to trying to help you breathe differently is an interesting approach. It's understandable if therapy isn't the right fit for you. Finding what works is key, whether it's speaking to someone, practicing self-care, or just taking it day by day.
Semi-related. That psychologist does not equal clinician or therapist. Yes, I'm getting a master's degree in psych, and hopefully a PhD after that. No, I'm not going to talk to people about their feelings while they lay on a couch for the rest of my life. It's already been noted how incredibly inaccurate that vision is anyway. I'll be fiddling with numbers and tests. Thank you very much. Psychology is a huge field. It's not just therapists.
It's interesting how people have a narrow view of psychology. My friend is studying the same field but plans to work with data too. She's always correcting assumptions people have about her future job. Some think it's all about therapy, but she's more into research and statistics. Just goes to show that psychology has many paths. They'll be surprised when she's crunching numbers instead of sitting on a couch.
I was diagnosed with schizophrenia a year ago, and I see a therapist every week. Thing is, I don't know how to talk about it or what to talk about. I thought the therapist would have a conversation seed or something to talk from, but for the most part one just sit there and listen to him ramble about his own life.
It sounds like a tough situation. It's hard to open up when you're not sure what to say. Sometimes it helps to prepare a few topics or feelings you want to discuss before the session. Therapists can sometimes get caught up in their own stories, which can be frustrating. Maybe you could steer the conversation back to what you need to talk about. Just take it one step at a time.
It's a common misconception that everyone who studies psychology is a counselor or therapist. I personally am pursuing a master's in applied psychological research and foresee myself working for either a hospital, research center, or university/college in the future. I want to help people, but I have learned through experience that a career in therapy would be detrimental to my own mental health, as I am incredibly empathetic and experience burnout from other people's emotions very quickly.
It's interesting how people assume studying psychology means you want to be a therapist. I get it though. When I was in school, I felt pressure to go that route too. But like you, I realized that my empathy could actually be a hurdle. Focusing on research or working in a hospital sounds like a good plan. It's important to find a path that aligns with your strengths without overwhelming yourself.
It's a difficult, thankless, low-paying for having a BA, MSW, or MA not sure about PhD job. I have been a social worker for many years. I love it, but I wish we were compensated for the difficult work we do. I have also lived overseas for several years. Social workers in many countries in Europe are not paid the crap wages that Americans in the same field are paid. I wish we had a wage that reflective of our experience and education.
It's tough to see someone put in so much effort and not get recognized for it. I know a friend who's been in social work for a long time. They love helping people, but the pay situation makes it hard. They often talk about how social workers in other countries are treated better. It feels frustrating when your passion doesn't match your paycheck. They just want fair compensation for the work they do.
There's a bias in our culture against the psychological and toward the physical. Psychological, social, and emotional phenomena are real. It's interesting that things like brain scans illustrate some biological underpinnings of psychological phenomena, but they aren't necessary to validate the legitimacy of the human experience. Pet peeve is the statement that goes something like, "Depression isn't in your head, we now know that it's in your brain."
That makes sense. It's frustrating when people oversimplify mental health. Experiencing emotions and thoughts is real, regardless of the science behind it. Just because it has a biological basis doesn't mean it isn't deeply personal. Using brain scans as a way to validate someone's feelings can feel dismissive. It's important to recognize the complexity of human experience, both psychologically and physically. Everyone's journey is unique, and that should be acknowledged.
Psychologist. The one thing that hinders the most would be people expect black and white/yes or no answers to everything. But anything you know enough about is always too complex to be put into a nice little easy box. I feel like I have to say it's complicated to almost every question I get now. But what kind of answer is that to give? It makes things complicated, uneasy face.
I get that. Sometimes people just want a straight answer, but life isn't that simple. I've had friends ask me for advice, and I find myself saying, "It depends," or "There's more to it." They look at me like I'm not helping. It can be frustrating, especially when you know there are layers to everything. Makes conversations feel more like a maze than a chat. But I guess that's just how it is.
Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.